What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in today's video we're going to be covering a very strong variation for e4 players against the Sicilian Defense. The Sicilian Defense is by far Black's most popular chess opening choice against e4, and really the main line is playing knight f3 and then breaking through in the center with d4. And I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with playing the main line, but many players don't want to go with this because usually Black is very well prepared for the chess opening strategy, variations, and positions that arise out of the main line. And on top of that, learning knight f3 and then breaking through with d4 can take a lifetime to learn. I mean, there's so many Sicilian defensive type systems that Black can play, and I'm talking potentially hundreds of hours of studying chess opening theory. Some of us simply don't have the time for that. What can we play against the Sicilian Defense to take our opponent by surprise while still playing a very high-level chess opening that is hard to deal with and is easy to learn? In today's video, I'm recommending the Snyder Variation with b3, which looks to play bishop b2, putting immediate pressure on g7, and also fighting for the center of the board on d4 and e5 while not giving up one of our center pawns. Now, I actually think that the Snyder Variation is a very underrated option for white, and many might not want to play this because they're scared of a move like d5. I mean, b3 does look, at least at first sight, very passive. Why can't Black just break through in the center of the board right away? I actually think that d5 is a mistake on Black's part. Here we can take that pawn, and following queen takes d5, played knight c3. This position is very similar to the Scandinavian defense, except that Black has a pawn on c5 and white has a pawn on b3. And I actually think that this is in white's favor because against the Scandinavian defense, Black usually plays queen a5. But obviously, because of this pawn on c5, it's probably in Black's best interest just to go back to d8, going right back where it started, in which case we can play bishop b2, and we have ourselves a nice advantage in development. Following a move like knight f6, we can play knight f3, and if a move like e6, I mean, white has so many different options here. At the master and grandmaster level, I have seen moves like bishop d3, a very interesting choice, putting pressure on the king side of the board, bishop b5 with check, attacking the opponent's king. I've seen queen e2, knight e5, even d4, a very hyper-dynamic option. I mean, just breaking through in the center of the board. I personally really like this option of knight e5, followed by f4. Knight e5 and f4 are very aggressive for white. I mean, following a move like castling kingside, we play queen f3, and it's kind of hard for Black to develop here. I mean, knight c6 can't be played, we'd simply take the knight, and if a move like knight fd7, trying to get rid of this very active piece, we can just castle queenside. And if Black ever takes our knight, we're completely okay with that. I mean, if a move like knight c6, it may seem like this pawn on e5 is very weak, but now we play knight e4. Our fianchettoed bishop protects that pawn, which is really making things hard for Black here. We have a centralized knight, an active queen, a bishop that can come to d3, c4, or b5. We can bring our rooks to e1, f1. We could even break through with a move like d4 here at some point, and I absolutely love white's game here. I would pick white every single time. So that covers why I don't think d5 is the best option for Black against the Snyder Variation. I mean, we're just going to take that pawn, play knight c3, and have ourselves a better version against the Scandinavian defense. What about the move knight c6? This is the most popular option, and honestly, it makes a ton of sense. Here, Black is trying to fight for the dark squares of the board, against which we're going to play bishop b2, fianchettoing our bishop and attacking that pawn on g7. And really here, Black has a couple options. One of them is playing very quiet chess with a move like d6 and just playing natural Sicilian defense type chess. The other is playing e5, and we're going to cover this move. I do want to mention that d5 could be played here, but it's very similar to what we just covered. I mean, we're just going to take that pawn, play knight c3, continue to develop, and work completely fine. What about the move e5? I think you're going to run into this move a ton if you do end up playing the Snyder Variation. And I mean, at first sight, this move makes a ton of sense. Black is trying to limit the activity of our bishop and is really trying to control the dark squares on d4 and f4. It may seem as if white is in a very defensive stance. Now, the very next move, Black would love to play something like d5, breaking through in the center of the board, eventually maybe even f5, but we do not want to allow Black to break through with d5. We're going to play bishop c4 immediately, followed by knight c3, really trying to get a clamp on that centralized square. And now if a move like knight f6, we're simply going to play d3, following bishop e7, play knight g e2. There's really not a ton that black can do from stopping this setup. And following a move like castling kingside and castling kingside from white as well, black now has a big decision to make with this knight on c6. Black might be tempted to play a move like knight a5, which at first sight makes it look like this bishop c4 move was a big mistake. We're going to play f4, and right now, black can gain the bishop pair, taking that bishop on c4, which was a pretty strong piece, putting pressure on f7. But now we can play d takes c4, and I think white is simply better. We have full control of that d5 square, and we're putting pressure on that backwards and very vulnerable pawn on d6, not to mention that this bishop is such a tall pawn, it can't even move right now, and white has all the time in the world. What do I mean by this? Well, let's say black plays a move like b6. We now play f5, and really in the Sicilian defense, black always wants to break through eventually with something like d5 or b5, but in this position, neither of these moves are going to happen. They're just not. We have a pawn on c4, a pawn on e4, a knight on c3, a queen on d1, which are all attacking that d5 square. Black simply has no hope of breaking through with that in this game. We're soon going to play a4, clamping even more on that b5 square, and here black simply has no hope of counterplay. We have all the time in the world to improve the positioning of our pieces, and black really can't do anything about it. Let's say black plays a move like bishop b7. Yes, black is making a threat with the bishop and knight against e4, but we just play knight g3. And following queen c7, we play a4. Following a6, we can play queen e2, bring our rook to d1, if rook a d8, even rook lift with something like rook d3 after king h7, because, here black really just has nothing to do. We can play rook f1. We're going to continue to slowly improve the positioning of our pieces. We can even play moves like bishop c1, really gaining that long diagonal, play knight h5. We have all the time in the world here, and white is simply better. So going back to this original position where we covered knight a5, we're completely okay with this. In the case of knight takes c4, we're going to take back with our d-pawn and gain even more of an advantage in the center of the board here. What happens if black plays knight d4? This move may look a little bit intimidating. This is a strong knight right in the center of the board, but we actually have nothing to worry about. We can play f4, expanding on the king side here. If a move like bishop g4, we can just play h3, and white is completely fine there. And if a move like bishop e6, again, we're completely okay. If black ever wants to capture our bishop, we're only going to have more control of that d5 square and give black even less chances of counterplay than they already have. Here we can play a move like a4, expanding on the queen side. And if a move like bishop takes c4, we can take back now with our b pawn, and against a6, continue with something like knight g3, against rook b8, play bishop c1, getting on this strong diagonal, protecting the f4 pawn, and also eyeing g5 and h6 in the future. Following a move like queen d7, we can capture that pawn on e5, continue with knight d5, knight f5 is on the way, and I absolutely love white's game here. We can always kick this knight out with c3, and white's simply better here. So that covers the move e5 from black. This may look very intimidating, but honestly, I don't think it's very strong. It simply makes d5 and e5 too weak. What happens if black plays a move like d6, just playing natural Sicilian type chess? Well, we can now play bishop e5. Pinning that knight on c6, we have an active light squared bishop, an active dark squared bishop, attacking that g7 pawn. And following a move like bishop d7, I personally really like f4. Our pawns on e4 and f4 are really trying to clamp down on that fifth rank. And following a move like a6, we're now going to take that knight on c6. I'm completely okay with giving up our light squared bishop. We're about to put our pawns on all the light squares while having a dark squared bishop, which is exactly what you want. Here we can play queen e2, and if knight f6, forming a threat against that centralized pawn, we can just play d3. Continue with natural developmental chess like knight f3, castle kingside, knight d2. There's really nothing black can do from stopping this natural setup. Putting our pawns on the light squares here, putting a pawn on f4, really trying to clamp down on e5 and g5. We have a strong dark squared bishop, two knights that are ready to get into this game, a solid queen, and a rook that is always ready to swing to e1. This really reminds me of the Grand Prix Attack, and in this position, you're oftentimes going to see something like d5. If black does not fight here, we're simply going to slowly mount a kingside attack against the opponent's king, What happens if a move like d5 is played? Against this, we're not going to take that pawn on d5. I mean, black could play something like queen takes d5, even knight takes d5, attacking that pawn on f4. We do not want to allow black to gain activity and counterplay in this position. We can simply play knight e5, a key move attacking that bishop on c6. And here we don't really need to worry about d takes e4 because we currently have a queen, pawn, and knight all defending that centralized pawn. If a move here like rook c8, we can simply take that bishop off the board, continue with something like a4 or c4, gaining space on the queen side of the board and really trying to take control of the light squares. I think that black needs to be careful not to play a move like d4. You may see this move a ton. I mean, d4 really seems to lock this bishop in on b2, but d4 is a huge mistake because we can take that bishop on c6, and following b takes c6, black's pawn structure is absolutely terrible. We have an isolated pawn on a6. I mean, these pawns on c6 and c5 might as well be double isolated pawns as well. We're going to continue with knight c4, a very nice square for this minor piece. Following a5, wanting to play a4. We don't want to allow black to play this, so we're going to play a4 ourselves, really locking this position up on the queen side of the board. Black could play a move like knight e8, followed by something like knight d6, trying to get rid of our knight on c4, but now we just play knight e5, and notice how we put our bishop on a3. We're attacking c5 and c6 right now. Black can't defend both. I mean, black has to lose one of these pawns. I mean, I guess technically black could play a move like queen b6, defending c6 and c5, but here we just play knight d7, forking the opponent's queen and rook. We're about to go up the exchange, and honestly, after d4, black's pawn structure is absolutely terrible. We're going to go on to win this game very easily. White is completely winning this here. If you'd like to learn more on the theory behind the delayed wing gambit, another strong and rare response against the Sicilian defense, click the video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about the hippopotamus defense, a fun and strong chess opening that you can play with either white or black, click the video to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.